The next is going to be free paper session. The session will be chaired by our Honorable Dr. Bahishri.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Can we proceed with the free papers? Yeah, thank you. Right. So we have 6 presenters, of which 3 are doing their presentation offline and 3 are doing online. What we thought was we'll finish the offline presentations together and then club the online together. Okay, so we'll need not switch here and there. And because I hope you understand, because we are running short of time, rather than the 45 minutes, we thought we'll make it much faster. So that will be like 5 minutes for each presentation. You can try best to, I hope the online presenters are also listening to the suggestions, right? Okay, yeah, thank you. So you can focus on your presentation. Just give a mini brief introduction about yourself, you know, who you are and from where you are, and then proceed with your presentation. So to begin with, we have our first presenter is V. Bhuvaneshwari. We have
good evening, everyone. I am Dr. V. Bhuvaneshwari, third year postgraduate from Tanjore Medical College. My study is about a cross-sectional study to examine the level of socio-occupational functioning and resilience in caregivers of OCD patient attending OPD tertiary care center. Brief introduction. Obsessive OCD is one of the severe mental illness with the chronic course and significant disability. It is the 4th most common psychiatric illness with the prevalence of 2 to 3%. Besides impact on quality of life of the patient, it also generates an additional burden for relatives and caregivers. Caregivers often become involved in ritualistic behavior, either through enabling, avoidance, or assisting ritualistic behavior. It causes a significant impairment in socio-occupational functioning. The family may find it difficult to cope with the exaggerated behavior seen in patients with OCD and may not know how to handle the situation. Hence, a study focus on resilience, which means ability to bounce back, and socio-occupational functioning. It is a person's role, action, and activity expected to perform by people. Explain the association between resilience and socio-occupational functioning. Objective is to examine the level and also find the association between resilience and socio-occupational functioning in caregivers of OCD patient. Methodology was conducted in tertiary care center outpatient department. Cross-sectional study conducted for 4 months. Non-probability sampling among 25 primary caregivers of OCD patient. Inclusion criteria: primary caregivers are screened by general health questionnaire of OCD patient diagnosed with ICD-10 criteria. They have to live with the patient at least for a year, who provided written informed consent. And exclusion criteria have to be, they have no intellectual impairment, comorbid diagnosis of psychiatric or neurological or any other physical illness were excluded. Scales used as a 14-item resilience scale. It is a 14-item self-report item. It is a 7-point rating scale. From 1, that is strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. The total score ranges from 14 to 98. Score below 65 indicate low resilience. Between 65 to 81 indicate moderate resilience. Above 81 will be high resilience. Global Assessment Function Scale is a numeric scale used by mental health clinician and physician to rate the socio-occupational function. Score ranges from 100 to 1. It is also used in DSM-4. 80 to 100 means normal, 70 to 80 means mild, 60 to 70 means moderate, less than 60 means severe impairment. And data analysis, frequencies and percentages were calculated by categorical variable. Analysis were done using SPSS V24 software, and a Pearson correlation test was used to see the correlation between caregivers' resilience and global assessment of function. P-value less than 0.05 was considered as statistically significant. Results in socio-demographic data, most of the caregiver was predominantly female between the ages of 25 to 40 years. They studied up to secondary school and were employed and were married. Majority of 64% are from lower middle class, and majority of 84 to 80% belongs to a joint family and also from rural background. In this result, figure 1 shows the table 2 shows that 40% belong to have moderately high resilience and 24% have moderately low resilience. The second figure also shows that 44% have mild impairment and 36% have moderate impairment. In this figure, shows a strong correlation between global assessment functioning and resilience scale. There is a positive correlation. Discussion in Indian studies, resilience in caregivers with OCD is not given much attention. This study indicated that caregivers have varied level of resilience level, and there is a strong positive correlation between resilience and global assessment functioning. And family support is needed for clients to benefit from behavior therapy, implementation of exposure response prevention therapy, CBT, and other behavior therapy technique by caregiver is very not easy, especially in a country like India. So focusing on resilience in caregivers can help to manage family accommodated behavior, such as not giving reassurance, not to take part in any proxy compulsion. The long duration of caregiving also leads to socio-occupational dysfunction. This study shows how resilient coping style can diminish the risk of socio-occupational dysfunction or promote the adaptation of the caregiver. Limitation, it is studied in a hospital population, so it cannot be generalized. There is also no baseline assessment with a comparable group, and study sample and study period is also very small. Building resilience in caregiver may really help them to improve their psychosocial functioning. Healthy primary caregiver would influence better clinical outcome. Hence, resilient coping styles can diminish the risk of socio-occupational dysfunction and promote the adaptation of the caregiver. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
That was a wonderful topic to study. In fact, that was one of my questions, if I remember. We'll just have one question because we have time, just one. I don't know whether I noticed, was there how many years of marriage? Was that any data? Have to live for 1 year. I mean, how long they are married? Did that have any correlation to their, the support? No, that really matters. Anyway, thank you. You're from which place, ma'am? Which? Any other questions? We'll move on to the next presentation. So the next presentation is by A. Shanmuga Priya.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Shanmuga Priya from Tanjavur Medical College, second year postgraduate student. Shall I start? My topic is association between problematic drinking and suicidal ideation, which is a comparative study. Harmful use of alcohol are one of the main risk factors for suicidal ideation of the suicide disability adjusted life year that is attributable to mental and substance use disorder 2010. Alcohol dependence was responsible for the second largest proportion. On average, someone commits suicide every 40 seconds. People with alcoholism are up to 120 times more likely to commit suicide. Main aim of the studies, alcohol expectancies as a facilitating factor in the association between problematic drinking and suicidal ideation, to explore the impact of problematic drinking on suicidal ideation based on alcohol expectancies. Methodology, patients were recruited from the OPD who committed suicide under the influence of alcohol. Patients' age ranged from 22 to 58 years were recruited. Inclusion criteria, male from 22 to 58 years of age, male who committed suicide under the influence of alcohol and who gives valid consent. Exclusion criteria, patients with substance use disorder other than alcohol, patients with other comorbid psychiatric illness, patients with metabolic illness and emotionally unstable personality. Sampling techniques and methods. Convenient sampling were used. Analytical cross-sectional study type. 40 patients who attempted suicide under the influence of alcohol. Study period for a period of 4 months. Tools used, audit scale. Audit scale mainly has self-administering questionnaire, 10-item scale, mainly used to group the patient into study group and a control group. Cutoff score of 8 or more is considered as an indicator for problematic drinking. Drinking expectancy questionnaire, 21-item self-reporting questionnaire. The purpose of these questions to find about the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about drinking alcohol. Added relevant items of 21 questions has 4 subscales. Increase confidence, tension reduction, cognitive and motor impairment, negative mood. Scores of more than 3 indicates endorsement of particular subscale. Beck suicidal intent scale, 19 items self-report inventory. Scores of 15 to 19 low intent, 20 to 28 medium intent, and more than 29 high intent. My statistical analysis and results, among age distribution, majority of the participants fell under the age of 30 years, followed by 31 to 40 years. Among the participants were grouped into two, that is 20%, that is 50% with problematic drinking and 20 without problematic drinking, based on the audit scale. And 21 among the whole total samples, 21 participants were found to have high suicidal intent. Here in this 2x2 tabulation depicts the association between suicidal intents and expectancies measured using chi-square test, which was statistically significant. Increased confidence and tension reduction have a protective effect against suicidal intents, whereas cognitive motor impairment with the odds ratio of 4.8 and negative mood with the odds ratio of 36.13 have high chance of getting into suicidal intent. So this table depicts 90% of population with problematic drinking have higher suicidal intent compared to 15% without problematic drinking. Odds ratio of 51 shows that that high problematic drinkers have high suicidal intent. So on subgroup analysis of high suicidal intent, to compare alcohol expectancies with problematic drinking, all alcohol expectancies have strong association with problematic drinking, proved by Fisher exact p-value. Results among the study population with high suicidal intent, negative mood was seen in 17 associated with problematic drinking compared to 0% association with non-problematic drinking that was statistically significant with the p-value of lesser than 0.003. Discussion: alcohol expectancies describe perception of physical and social effects of one might experience in alcohol consumption. These effects can be separated into two broad categories, that is positive and negative. A study conducted by Jones and Corbin proved that positive alcohol expectancies, beliefs of alcohol which reduce tension, improve mood, or enhance social or sexual experiences. Negative expectancies, which include negative mood, undesirable motor, and cognitive impairment. Two dimensions of alcohol, that is problematic drinking and without problematic drinking, on the basis of audit self-report questionnaire. After administering DEQ self-report questionnaire among the study population, it was found that population who scores higher on negative mood subscale strongly associated with problematic drinking. According to alcohol expectancy theory, vicarious and direct experience with drinking and its consequences shape the expectancies for alcohol-related outcome, proved by Goldman et al. Alcohol expectancies found to be strong predictors of drinking behavior. Another study found that positive expectancies responsible for binge drinking. Fewer studies are conducted on alcohol expectancies questionnaire relevant to the mainly on the subscale negative mood. One study conducted by Dune et al. Alcohol outcome expectancies and regrettable drinking related social behaviors. One study done by Anthony M. Lambo and neighbors on 2017, association between negative urgency and alcohol consumption. Problematic drinking association with the increased risk of suicidal ideation with the odds ratio of 51 corresponds to confidence interval of 95%. These findings suggest that alcohol expectancies may have impelling effect on the problematic drinking association with suicidal ideation. Limitation: it is a convenience sampling, so it's a fewer chance of equal chance of participation in the trial study. The effect of alcohol expectancies need to be controlled with other comorbid psychiatric symptoms and personality disorder like borderline personality disorder. Future extensive work should investigate the interactive effects of mood, alcohol expectancy, and problematic drinking on suicidal ideation. The study precluded association of alcohol expectancy on coping motive and self-efficacy. Conclusion: the present study, after administering DEQ self-reported questionnaire among the study population, found the negative alcohol expectancy strongly associated with suicidal ideation. Contextual influences on expectancy require extensive future research to improve alcohol-related intervention and suicide prevention programs. Significant attention should be paid for alcohol expectancy as it displays internal cues of an individual and to predict the high-risk behaviors and serious consequences like attempting suicide. Thank you.
Yeah, so Shanmuga Priya, I could see that the significance of statistics in the study, just by going by the correlation coefficient, just the association, You have gone comprehensively on the statistics, and that's a wonderful joy. I appreciate you for that. Can I just know what is convenience sampling and how did you select the samples?
Convenience sampling is like a non-probability sampling, ma'am. Patients who are coming to our psychiatric OPD, we are recruiting them. Actually, like we generally in a day, 10 or more patients will be referred from medicine units, ma'am, for the psychoeducation and for psychiatric evaluation of the patient who is for committing or attempting suicide. So among these patients who attempted, we have some separate 104 form, ma'am. So those who attempted suicide under the influence of alcohol can be easily marked in that. So we can recruit easily from that.
We choose among them or randomly, or we take in everybody?
Ma'am, choose among them, ma'am.
Based on what did we choose? Like,
ma'am, anyone who commits suicide under the influence of alcohol will be chosen, and later on they will be grouped on the basis of audit test score.
So anyone, 104 that form, anyone with this 2 history, we just take.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. So I now invite the next offline presenter, A. Vidya.
Good afternoon to one and all present over here. I would first like to thank our college, Trichy SRM Medical College Research Center and Hospital. And I thank our HOD, Dr. Shivaraman sir, and thank Assistant Professor Dr. Roy sir for giving me this great opportunity to present here. And my study title is an observational study on positive Facebook feedback, its association with self-esteem and its influence on purpose in life. So coming to the introduction, Facebook is the world's largest online network and it has been designed with the like option for the posted content. Affirmations obtained on virtually posted content corresponds positively with self-esteem and subjective well-being. One such important content is profile display photograph, likes and reactions. If purpose in life is greater, it lessens the sensitivity of self-esteem to positive Facebook feedback such as likes. This study evaluated the association of positive Facebook feedback and its influence on purpose in life for medical students and its association with self-esteem. Many researchers found that adolescents who view photographs posted to social media with more likes have greater activation of neural regions which involved reward processing, social cognition, imitation, and attention. So coming to the review of literature, according to sociometry theory, individual self-esteem is responsive to one's value to others and environment. So that purpose in life will be attenuated, means the self-esteem can be attenuated with the purpose in life. So coming to the materials and method, this study is a qualitative cross-sectional study, and the sampling was a heterogeneity sampling, and we used the average Facebook user profile, and we used self-esteem. We assessed the self-esteem and purpose in life using the Rosenberg self-esteem scale and the life engagement test scale. And coming to the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, is a 10-item scale, and it evaluated most of the components of the self-esteem. So coming to the results, here in our study, the most of the male population had expected likes, for example, less than 200. And coming to the socio-demographic profile relationship, the expected likes, those who had expected likes for the profile picture were negatively correlated to the self-esteem. So these are the results. Here, around 80% disagreed that they have no purpose in life, and around 72% agreed that they have worthwhile doing the worthwhile things, and 8% said that they are doing unimportant things, and around 72% said that they are valuing the activities, and 72 and 58% said that they are they have no care about the activities, and around 80% said that there are lots of reasons for living. So coming to the Rosenberg self-esteem results, around 90% of the medical students said that they have self-satisfaction in the things what they do, and only minimal around 8% said disagreed that I'm no good at all, and 90% said that they have a good quality possession, And around 10% said that said that they have self-pride, and 11% said that they feel useless. And coming to doing things as well as others, around 90% agreed for that component. So coming to the socio-demographic variables, there was a strong there was no strong association between the expected likes and the age. And there was no strong correlation with the expected likes and the purpose in life, or doing worthwhile things, or doing the important things, or valuing the activities. So coming to self-esteem variables, and the medical students had no positive or correlation with the expected lives for their good quality possession, or for their doing as well as others, and they had 90% self-satisfaction. So coming to the discussion, higher levels of purpose in life exhibited greater emotional recovery from the negative pictures. Initially, if the person sees the negative pictures, they will be reacting to it, and thereby they will accommodate. According to the Heyman and Steinthal et al., who had given the better picture about the social psychology, which means it is a scientific study where the behavior is responsible or exhibited according to the stimulus of the environment. So this study has given a better results about that theory. So if we have a higher purpose in life, the negative pictures initially will be reacting to it, and later will be adaptive to that. And this emotional regulatory profile has been evaluated with this study. So coming to the conclusion, positive Facebook feedback is not strongly associated with self-esteem and does not strongly influence the purpose in life for the medical students. So the limitations of the study is that personality traits and personality inventory has not been assessed. Social desirability response bias was there. So these were the references which made me to do this study. And these are some of the interesting articles which thrown a light to make this study. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, that was an interesting topic, but somehow I'm still not able to understand the conclusion. Can you please clarify it again?
Good afternoon, ma'am. This study is mainly about dealing with the social psychology, ma'am. So I have took around 100 participants for this study, and we measured their self-esteem and purpose in life, and their
Feedback.
average Facebook
Positive feedback.
positive feedback. So in that study, there we have studied about the expected likes and its association with the self-esteem and purpose in life. So if they had a higher self-esteem and means if they have a higher purpose in life, their self-esteem will be higher. That if the Facebook if suppose the expected likes which they feel is low also, their self-esteem will not be affected or influenced by that any expected likes of the Facebook. So if we have a higher purpose in life, we have a better self-esteem.
So the feedbacks, they don't matter, for the
feedback will not modulate.
Yeah. But for medical students, are they already clear with the purpose in life?
Ma'am, I thought to do the study with the medical
as
students.
my understanding, when it comes to self-esteem, this Freudian concept and all of that, that's a developmental thing, especially, the stages. Self-esteem comes in, one of the stages earlier, and by the time they become medical students, the only purpose which runs in any medical student's life is, okay, maybe service to people, having a good practice and all that. But yeah, I do accept the early catching of a purpose in life will kind of protect everybody in keeping up our self-esteem. I think that's my understanding. Am I right?
Ma'am, I take this forum as granted. Profession is, I respect all the profession, ma'am. My study is that being a doctor, I applied this scale to the medical students, and I think that they are some of the great. They can do wonders for the world.
Yeah, we
For
are
such
doing
thing.
wonders. I do understand that. So everybody has to get a sense of purpose in life. That is going to help us. Yeah, that's the
Thank you.
summary. I understand. Thank you for
Thank
that
you.
wonderful topic you've taken. So thank you. We'll move on to the online presentations. We have a first presenter online, our Monisha. Are you ready? Our Monisha?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me, ma'am?
You're not audible.
Hello.
Yeah,
Ma'am.
you're audible now, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Introduce yourself and you can do your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, is my screen visible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. You can start.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Monisha from PES College, Kuppam. I am going to present a case today, which is recurrent depressive disorder, current episode, severe depression with psychosis. The psychosis part he had was delusional parasitosis and Cotard syndrome. Introduction. Delusional parasitosis is a rare psychiatric disorder presented with an unremitting false belief that they are infested with parasites. The delusion is usually long-standing and well integrated into the patient's persona. It has been estimated that around 60% of people with delusional infestation have an underlying organic or psychiatric condition, which is termed a secondary organic delusional infestation or secondary functional delusional infestation. A study of 134 people with delusional infestation in England found that 52% had anxiety, 41.6% had depression, 49 appearance-related concerns. A high percentage of people with delusional infestation continue to refuse help and will not engage in any therapeutic work. Delusional parasitosis can be treated with antipsychotic medication and psychiatric consultants, but generally does not respond well to such treatment. Cotard syndrome is named after Jules Cotard, a French neurologist who described this condition for the first time in 1880. He formulated it as a new type of depression characterized with following symptoms, which are anxious melancholy, ideas of rejection, insensitivity to pain, delusion of non-existence, and delusion of immortality. Whether the syndrome is a distinct disorder or a symptom of other disorders has been a subject of debate. There's a growing concern to consider Cotard syndrome and its typical nihilistic delusion as a symptom of underlying disorder. Nihilistic delusion are reported as an example of mood congruent delusion of a depressive episode with psychotic features. Although it's not a diagnostic entity, knowledge on Cotards and the specific approach to treating patients is valuable. The following figure will show the approach of patient with symptoms of delusional parasitosis. The only prevalent study was performed in a selected psychogeriatric setting in Hong Kong. In that, diagnosis was made in 2 of 349 patients, suggesting a prevalence of 0.57 in that population. In its earlier course, the Cotard syndrome is characterized by a feeling of anxiety lasting from weeks to years. This anxious state gradually increases and can result in origin of nihilistic delusion, in which denial of body parts or life is a prominent feature. This is the flowchart describing how to approach the patient with symptom of delusional parasitosis. A patient with the symptom, if it is acute onset, any other neurological treatment, any other neurological cause of delirium should be ruled out and treated as accordingly. If it is a real infestation, according to the clinical examination, history and investigation, we should treat accordingly. Or if it is a confirmed delusional parasitosis, it can be ruled out as primary or secondary. Coming to the case report, Mr. R, a middle-aged male of lowest socioeconomic status of agrarian background, presented with a low mood, fatigability, irritable sleep disturbance, disinterest in work, feeling hopeless, crying spells, following his mother's death for 10 months with significant history of similar complaints 5 years back, which was resolved after treatment with antidepressants for a year. Patient had fear of contracting HIV as his mother died suffering from HIV/AIDS. Provisional diagnosis of recurrent depressive disorder, current episode severe depression was made with treatment initiation. Subsequent follow-up after a month found Mr. R having complaints of fear of having HIV, fear of death, chest pain, associated palpitations, sweating. He attributed his pain to shrinkage of heart. He was found to have believed that his heart is being infested by organisms living inside his body, although sadness persisted. Diagnosis was revised to RDD, current episode severe depression with psychosis, and we initially kept as delusional parasitosis. Antidepressants were retitrated with antipsychotic initiation. The next visit, after 2 months, Mr. R complained of breathlessness as his lungs were infested by multiple organisms and being destroyed by the organisms with marginal improvement in sadness. He said, I feel it moving inside my nerves, moving around my chest. He told his breath may stop suddenly as his lungs are eaten up and those organisms move through the nerves along the nose to his head and come back, and was wondering if any other organs are destroyed too. The mental status examination findings showed delusion of infestations along with nihilistic delusion and also tactile hallucination with mood to be anxious. As he is from a long distance and from poor background, he returned present for the next follow-up, and complaints was also in suspect. And in the follow-up after 3 months, he reported that his lungs are destroyed and one of his lungs is missing from his body, causing him breathing difficulty. And he reported that all were a consequence of the organism devouring his organs. The following table shows his treatment and his response. He came in December 2020, and from December to January, we have given him escitalopram for started with 10 and high to 20 and clonazepam. The response was sadness improved, sleep improved, anxiety features persisted with delusion of infestation. And in Jan to March, he was receiving escitalopram, risperidone, and mirtazapine. There was marginal improvement in anxiety, but the delusion of infestation persisted, which was even increased. And the HAM-D score was 16 and belief scale was 20. In March to May, he was receiving escitalopram, risperidone, and mirtazapine. Anxiety persisted, sleep disturbances improved, delusion of infestation increased, and HAM-D was 10, belief scale was 20. From June to September, he was receiving amitriptyline, risperidone, and mirtazapine. Anxiety persisted, delusion of infestation still increased, and along with nihilistic delusion. HAM-D was 7, belief scale was 24. And in October, we have admitted the patient. We have increased risperidone to 8 milligram, and amitriptyline was also hiked to 150 milligram. Mirtazapine was continued, and we have decided to take for ECT, and 4 sessions have been completed till date. His anxiety improved. Delusional features are not noted grossly, and now the belief scale is 6. Discussion. Delusional parasitosis is a disorder that can be defined simply as a mistaken or false belief that one is infested with ectoparasites or infected with internal parasites, generally worm type. Although bacteria, real imagined organisms may be described by the patient. Indeed, patients with DP are usually fascinated with their condition and have extensively investigated it themselves. Individuals with delusional parasitosis come from a wide variety of socioeconomic and occupational background. Generally speaking, they are not entomophobic, but they have a responsible grasp of reality. A proposal for the staging of Cotard's was made by Yamada et al. In 1999. Working with one patient, 3 stages were defined: germination stage, blooming stage, and chronic stage. In germination stage, there is important hypochondria, kinestopathy, depressive mood, and Cotard syndrome cannot be diagnosed during the stage. In blooming stage, the characteristic feature of Cotard was the nihilistic delusion. Delusion of immortality together with anxiety and negativism are seen. In the chronic stage, differentiation into 2 forms is made: one with persistent emotional disturbance, depressive type, and the second is a paranoid type. Explanatory analysis of psychopathological symptoms found 3 factors: a psychotic depression, anxiety, delusion of guilt, depression, and hallucination. Cotard syndrome type 1, which is hypochondriacal delusion and nihilistic delusion relating to the body, concepts, and existence. Cotard syndrome type 2, anxiety, delusion of immortality, hallucination, nihilistic delusion relating to existence and suicidal behaviors. In this case, the patient had tactile hallucination, nihilistic delusion related to body, hypochondriacal delusion of having HIV, depression, which subsided, and the anxiety features started and was persisting for some time. The highlights of this case are not only the unfamiliarity of the syndrome, but the co-occurrence of both delusional parasitosis and Cotard's. It also highlights a problem faced by the patients due to mislead of the public and lack of knowledge about the underlying symptoms. The role of poverty and lesser accessibility to mental health care also added to the risk and could be the reason for his non-compliance and continued ill health. The treatment for Cotard's or delusional parasitosis is given in the following figure. We can give antipsychotics, antidepressants, and adjuvant benzodiazepines. Antipsychotics, we can prefer any of these things: amisulpride, aripiprazole, chlorpromazine, flupentixol, haloperidol, olanzapine. And antidepressant, amitriptyline, amoxicillin, duloxetine, fluoxetine, escitalopram, paroxetine, sertraline. And benzodiazepines can be given. If there is no response to pharmacotherapy, ECT can be preferred. ECT might be effective for Cotard's delusion because it has potential effect on psychotic symptoms. The mechanism of effectiveness of ECT for Cotard's is not known till date. Some studies suggest that Cotard's has neurological correlates. In the review by Kudler et al., the radiological findings noted abnormalities in the non-dominant frontal, temporal, and occasionally the parietal lobes. It has effect on the organic brain dysfunction also. In this case, ECT was preferred for its role in recalcitrant depression with psychosis. Conclusion: the delusional infestation of Cotard's is a complex, difficult illness to treat, but experience should be taken seriously, and some patients can be helped to make their experience less threatening, less interfering in their life, and more controllable. They have an interface with different professionals, including dermatologists, physicians, and entomologists. Though any medical professional become familiar with such disorder, to date, the only effective treatment remains to be antipsychotics or ECT. Multidisciplinary robust RCT involving dermatologists, medical entomologists, psychiatrists are needed to study different treatment approaches, and more research is needed to look for new pathways for treatment setting or delivery. Based on the classification of Berios and Luke, they suggested that ECT is an important option for patients with Cotard's with psychotic depression. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Monisha. In fact, that's a very common case we see in practice. Maybe you had mentioned it's like kind of unfamiliarity. Even I think last week I had such a case where they presented with delusional parasitosis, almost mounting to nihilistic delusions. It's very common. The differential diagnosis, I don't know whether you have thought about it. You have to also think about OCD.
Okay, ma'am.
I mean, always think about OCD and try to differentiate whether they are obsessions. I mean, the slight difference, right? Are they recurrent? Are they irrational? Those kind of things. And any investigations to rule out organicity done in your case? Basic investigations, because neuropathy also sometimes presents like this. As you already mentioned in your literature, right? Organic imaging studies do show findings.
We just done CT brain, ma'am, and it was normal, ma'am. We couldn't find any organic pathology, ma'am.
MRI wasn't done, right? MRI does show some findings in some cases. So just a suggestion. And it's no more available now. There was a wonderful molecule called pimozide, which really works for delusional parasitosis. And as always, we have our wonderful ECT, which is like the golden weapon, and which takes care of any kind of symptoms we have. Anyway, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we move on to the next presenter online, Dr. Apeksha Kulkarni.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Dr. Apeksha Kulkarni.
Yes, am I audible?
You're audible, doctor. Yeah, you can start.
Are my slides visible, ma'am?
I think you should start your share screen. You should click on that. We can see you, not your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah. Dr. Apeksha, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. I think you can focus more on the specific points you have to do with your study, because it's a prevalence.
Good evening. Myself, Dr. Apeksha Kulkarni, and I'm third year postgraduate from Andhra Medical College, Visakhapatnam. My study goes like a study on prevalence of suicidal ideation and its association with depression among the LGBTQ population. The gender and sexual minorities are diverse population across the cultures. This minority includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgenders, and queer. LGBTQ people are disproportionately affected by the structural barriers, quality to healthcare, mental health challenges, and the economic hardships. Stress reactions and internalized psychological factors were main contributors to poor mental outcome, and such as depression or anxiety. Experience of prejudice events, expectations of rejection, hiding and concealing internalized homophobia, and ineffective coping strategies are the key elements of the psychiatric disorders. Sexual and gender minority youth are highly vulnerable to experiencing the suicidal crisis, points to the importance of identifying the pathways that can be leveraged. Experience of discrimination and mistreatment have been shown to be associated with a greater risk for the adverse physical and mental health outcomes, including the increased suicidal attempts, higher rates of depressive symptoms, anxiety for the transgender people when compared to the general population. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual transgender individuals approximately are twice as likely to report the suicidal ideation as reported by the one of the study in 2008. The aim of the study is made to assess the prevalence of the suicidal ideation and depressive symptoms in the LGBTQ population, and the second aim is to know the relation between the suicidal ideation and the depression. This is a cross-sectional study. The study used snowball sampling technique, and information about the participants was collected from the organization and the NGOs working on the gender minorities. Contact numbers was taken and the interview was done. Persons who self-identified themselves belonging to the LGBTQ were included in the study. Objectives of the study was explained, consent was taken, and the subjects who were on psychiatric treatment were excluded, and the total 40 participants completed the interview. Two scales I have used in the study. First is the patient health questionnaire, that is PHQ-9. Patient health questionnaire is a self-administered version of the primary MD diagnostic instrument for common mental disorders. It can be administered by a clinician also. The PHQ is used primarily to screen whether the person has a depression or not. And the second is Columbia Suicide Severity Scale. It is only the screening version. It tells whether the person has the suicidal ideation or not, and we can categorize them into low risk, medium risk, and the high risk. It has the 6 components, and it can be self-administered or can be applied by the clinicians. And the statistics was applied through SPSS. SPSS was applied. And as we can see, 20 to 30 years were the major population, and 40% were in 20 to 30 years. And gay and bisexuals were more compared to the lesbians and transgenders. And in the 40 participants, 22 participants reported yes for the suicidal ideation, while the 18 reported no for the suicidal ideation. While in case of depression, in the 28 participants, depression, they reported the depression, and there was no depression in the 12 participants. This is the association between suicidal ideation and demographic characteristics. As we can say that the persons who are unemployed and who are staying with and who are staying alone are at the higher risk. And the p-value was 0.04, and it was statistically significant. And this was between the depression and the demographic characteristics. Here also we can find that the unemployed and the who are staying alone are at the greater risk. This is the suicidal ideation category. For 10%, 10 people reported low risk, 7 people reported moderate risk, and the 5 people reported the high risk. While minimal depression was present in 12 members, mild in 15, and moderate in 1 individual. And this is association between the suicidal ideation and depression. Like we can see the minimal depression, the 80% reported the low suicidal ideation, while in a moderate depression, 80% of them reported the high risk for the suicidal ideation. A study conducted in 2020 showed that 2/3 of the participant endorsed having experienced suicide ideation during their lifetime. Moreover, nearly 1/3 of the participants reported a past suicide attempt. A study conducted in 2017 reported the mean depression score of participants exceeded the established threshold of more than 10 on CVSD-10. Results from the recent US transgender survey were equally disconcerting, significant that the 46% of the participants reported being verbally harassed, and 9% of the participants reported being physically harassed. In the study, gays and bisexuals were more than the lesbians and transgenders. Among 40 individuals, 22 reported suicidal ideation, while the 80 reported no suicidal ideation, and 70% of the study population reported the depressive symptoms. Unemployed and who were staying alone experienced the higher rate of the suicidal ideation compared to the others. And the conclusion of my study includes the study 50% of the participants from the LGBTQ community experiences suicidal ideation, while 2/3 patient experienced depressive symptoms, and 50% individuals are in low risk when assessed for suicidal ideation. Association between the suicidal ideation and the depression was statistically significant. Community-based approach is needed to eliminate the mental health problems being faced by the sexual minorities. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Doctor. That again, I think it was a very relevant topic you took up for, at this time of thing where LGBTQ is a hot topic of discussion. And such small studies really do add to the data, the numbers, which go a long way in, in submitting data to the government and making acts. Okay, so it was a nice topic selection, and congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we move on to the last presenter, online presenter, Dr. Uha Manasa Badiga. Yes, Dr. Uha. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can start your presentation, Doctor.
Can you see my slides, ma'am?
No, we can't see your slides. Yes, we can see them. You have 5 minutes, you can
Yes,
start.
ma'am. A very good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Uha Manasa. Today I'm going to present a paper with the title, Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Mental Well-Being of NEET Medical PG Aspirants. Introduction. Medical education is considered to be most stressful, and medical students are the vulnerable group for mental health issues like depression and anxiety. In a densely populated country like India, the selection of candidates is through a rank-based system by conducting competitive exams like NEET PG. This system already incurs a lot of stress among aspirants. In addition to the psychosocial stresses, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2019 has made things worsen. Contraction of COVID infection, hospitalization, and bereavement of the family members are the additional events which had a huge impact on the PG aspirants. Our study aims to find the depression, anxiety, and the level of hope among the NEET medical PG aspirants amidst COVID-19 pandemic. Aims and objectives: to assess the prevalence of depression and anxiety in NEET medical PG aspirants in relation to the pandemic. Materials and methods. A cross-section study was conducted among 108 NEET medical PG aspirants who completed internship and are preparing for the NEET PG exam. Data was collected by sending online Google Forms containing questionnaire including the socio-demographic details, education status, years of preparation, and COVID-related questions. The following self-assessment tools were also included: Beck 13-item depression inventory, Beck 21-item anxiety inventory. They both are validated, standardized self-assessment screening tools. Adult Hope Scale, a 12-item measure of level of hope, each item answered using a 8-point Likert scale. The data collected was entered into a spreadsheet and statistically analyzed using the SPSS latest version. These are the questions asked. Results. A total of 108 PG aspirants participated in the study, 74 females and 34 males. The minimum age of aspirants from the study is 23 years and the maximum age is 35 years with a mean age of 25.44. Out of the 108 students, 91 of them were single and 12 of them were married. Frequency of distribution of years of preparation among the PG aspirants. The percentage of preparation of years of less than 1 year is 45.4%, 1 to 2 years is 49.1%, and more than 2 years is 5.6%. Prevalence of depression among the aspirants in relation to the pandemic. The overall depression ranging from the mild to severe among the NEET PG aspirants is 68.5%, and those with a history of COVID contraction is found to be 78.5%. An association between the COVID contraction and severity of the depression is seen with a significant p-value of 0.044. Prevalence of anxiety among the aspirants in relation to the pandemic. The overall anxiety ranging from mild to severe among the aspirants is 64%. No significant association between the COVID contraction and anxiety is seen. It was found that 10.2% of the aspirants have no hope, 23.1% less hopeful, 21.3% hopeful, and 26.9% with moderate hope, and 18.5% with high hope. No significant association is established between the COVID status and the hope level. Discussion. Anxiety and depression can be used as a valid indication for determining the prevalence of mental illness in a community. The emotional well-being of students during medical school training has long been a source of worry because it has a potential to impair the students' overall performance and has a cascade of ramifications on both personal and professional level. In Shailesh Roy et al. Study, 24% of the medical PG aspirants experience a moderate to severe depression and 42% of them have anxiety. In the current study, 52.8% of the medical PG aspirants experience a moderate to severe depression. Our study confirms the previous study findings of prevalence of depression and anxiety among the aspirants. The overall depression of the NEET PG aspirants with a history of COVID contraction was found to be 78.5%, and significant association between the COVID contraction history and depression is established. 64% of the aspirants experienced mild to moderate severity irrespective of the COVID contraction history, and an association with the pandemic is not found. A significant association between the level of hope and the pandemic is not established in the study. Limitations. No structured COVID-related questionnaire is available to apply, and the individual's present mental status can contribute to the recall bias. Confounding factors like family history of psychiatric illness, past history of depression were not considered in the study. In conclusion, contraction of COVID infection has contributed to already prevailing depression among aspirants. Anxiety and depression were evident among medical PG aspirants in our study. So there is an urgent need to address the pandemic-related mental health crisis effectively, and further studies with structured questionnaire have to be done to safeguard the mental well-being of the budding healthcare professionals. Thank you. These are my references.
Thank you, Dr. Uha. Once again, thank you for taking up the topic on something to do with our medical fraternity, a very important topic, I would say. As I had already mentioned, the confounding factors, I think, this is just a suggestion. Maybe further studies, you can just line up with the similar topics, the more structured, less of confounding factors, you having done already this topic, this would really add up to a very valid, nice data results. And yeah, so those are my comments. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, ma'am. I welcome Dr. K. Ramakrishnan, sir, to hand over the memento to our chairperson.
Madam, go and choose a best presenter here in this session.
Sir, if I go by so many aspects, in fact, I've scored, but I think with regard to the youth, this SRM presentation was close to my heart, where the social media, the positive feedback, the self-esteem really was, I think, the need of the hour for the youth. So I think that would be my chosen.
Thank you, madam. The student will get a coffee mug by courier.
Vidya, Dr. Vidya from SRM. Vidya from SRM.
And I am very happy that I am presenting this memento to my student.